It's Stan Veit's History of the Personal Computer. From Altair to IBM, A History of the PC Revolution. By Stan Veit, Editor-in-Chief Emeritus, Computer Shopper. Hey everyone, it's your friend David Greelish from Classic Computing, and welcome back to the channel. Today's episode is going to be a little different. As many of you know, Randy and I are about 2/3 of the way through our ongoing audiobook series, reading chapter by chapter through Stan Veit's incredible book, Stan Veit's History of the Personal Computer. Normally we'd be dropping the next chapter right about now, but Randy's been busy preparing for, traveling to, and then from the Vintage Computer Festival Southwest. Because of that, our next official chapter reading will be coming next week. In the meantime, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to share a more personal piece of history. Back in September 2010, shortly after Stan passed away, I wrote an article for the Classic Computing blog reflecting on his life, his enormous impact on the computer industry, and how he personally encouraged and supported my early work in computer history. So today, please sit back and enjoy the special solo reading of my article, Remembering Stan Veit. Stan Veit, an early retail innovator of personal computers, writer, editor, and publisher, died in his home on July 29th, 2010, surrounded by his loving family and friends. He was 90 years old. We can all see that living to 90 is a feat that most of us won't accomplish. A full, long life like Stan's should be celebrated, but we also realize that losing someone you love is very sad. My deepest sympathies go out to his family and close friends. Stan touched my life in a very real way, and while I admired him, I was not close to him. I wish that I could have known him better. Stan was born on Christmas Day in New York City in 1919. He attended Brooklyn Polytechnic Institute and Hofstra College, after which he served in the U.S. Army Air Corps during World War II. Post-war, he worked as a technical writer for a slew of well-respected companies, including Republic Aviation, Loral Electronics, Grumman, ITT, and Bell Labs. Stan enjoyed his work, but grew weary of working on contract-dependent jobs, where once he completed his good project work, he was released. In 1975, Stan was looking for a better opportunity when he read an article about Dick and Lois Heiser. The Heisers opened the first ever computer store called Arrowhead Computers, the computer store in Los Angeles, California. The computer store specialized in selling Altair computers and related books. Stan thought that was a novel idea and decided he would research opening his own computer store in New York City if he wasn't able to find a real job first. Knowing that location was an important consideration, Stan discussed the idea with Louis Polk, owner of Polk's Hobby Department Store at 32nd Street and 5th Avenue. Polk agreed to sublet space to Stan, and the Computer Mart of New York was born. Stan's store was the first computer store on the East Coast, and only the second one in the world, incorporating in December 1975 with retail operations beginning in February 1976. The Computer Mart was the first to sell more than one brand, beginning with the Sphere, MSI, and Southwest Technical products, and adding more brands later. The store quickly became popular, and by mid-1976, Polk told Stan that he could no longer operate on the first floor, as his computer store was now interfering with the sale of toys. Stan's only option was moving to the basement, which he didn't want to do, so he gambled and rented a large storefront on 32nd Street and Madison Avenue. Around this same time, the Computer Mart became the third Apple dealer in the country. Stan had met both Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in California, and he was impressed with their computer, the Apple I. Woz had also showed him the Apple II prototype, and Steve Jobs even tried to convince Stan to invest $10,000 for a 10% stake in Apple Computer, but Stan had all of his money wrapped up in his business. Plus, he wasn't that impressed. Anyway, Stan thought he could help them, as well as help his future sales of their machines, so he invited them to share his booth at the first big computer show in Atlantic City. Stan tells a great story in his book, Stan Veit's History of the Personal Computer, where both his wife Dee Dee and her mother were at that show too. Steve Jobs and Dan Kaki showed up to hang some signs. The Woz was back in the hotel room, still finishing up BASIC for the Apple I. Stan's mother-in-law noticed holes in the seat of Jobs' jeans and demanded that he allow her to mend them. She said, "Young man, your backside is sticking out of holes in those jeans. You are not going to be in my booth like that. Take them off and I'll sew them up now." Somewhat shocked, Steve Jobs went behind the curtain of the booth and got his pants repaired. The Computer Mart of New York did solid business and was a success. That is until 1980. A large part of their business was based on the sale of processor technology computers and parts. When that segment started collapsing, it left the Computer Mart with a large excess of inventory. Stan was also having problems with bank financing, and the convergence of these two problems led to a shortfall in operating capital. The Computer Mart went out of business, and Stan felt like his dreams were crushed. He did remain in computer retail for a little while, though, working for a few other dealers. He also began writing magazine articles, plus a couple of books. He had collaborated earlier in 1977 on a book with Leslie Solomon called Getting Involved with Your Own Computer, A Guide for Beginners. Some of his articles were for Popular Electronics, and later in 1980, he became the computer editor. One of the earliest regular columns Stan wrote was for a little computer paper that sold used computers called Computer Shopper. Based out of Florida, its publisher Glenn Patch was looking for it to grow. Patch offered Stan the job of editor to expand his publication. Not only did the position pay well, but Stan would also be in charge, so he could run the magazine as he saw fit. At first, he was able to stay in New York and only travel to Florida about 1 week out of a month. But as the publication became more successful, his stays in Florida became longer than his time back home. Ultimately, the Veits bought a home in Florida, Dee Dee moved down, and they could again be together all the time. The Computer Shopper grew substantially, ultimately becoming a phone book-sized magazine of over 800 pages. It was carrying 500 to 600 advertising pages in every issue. Stan had become both editor-in-chief and publisher. Many other large computer publishers made offers to buy the magazine, but Patch would not sell, until finally he accepted an offer from Ziff Davis to form a limited partnership. Stan gave up his publisher title, but remained editor-in-chief for another year until a replacement could be found. Since 1987, Stan has been the editor-in-chief emeritus. He's semi-retired, but later started writing a regular computer history column called Whatever Happened To. I discovered this column sometime around 1991 or so. I was a big Apple Macintosh person, so I didn't have much use for the giant Computer Shopper, but I was in the Army, in Germany, and starved for computer magazine input. I subscribed to 2 Mac magazines, and they only arrived once a month. So one day at the Post bookstore, I flipped through a Computer Shopper and found Stan's column. I had recently become very interested in computer history, so Stan's column sealed the deal. I loved his column, and I also enjoyed just flipping through the magazine for the sometimes interesting and sheer volume of ads. Sometime in mid-1992, I bought a 2400 baud modem for my Mac Classic, subscribed to CompuServe, and went online for the first time. I discovered a small but active classified section where I purchased some of my first old collectible computers. I also discovered the discussion forum that Stan ran there, and I exchanged some email with him. I had a great new hobby, reading all about computer history and collecting computers. So I thought starting a club for people like me would be a novel idea. My wife and I were to transfer back to the States in late March of 1993, so I started planning. I decided to publish a bi-monthly newsletter, and maybe one day even start a computer museum. After moving into our apartment in El Paso, Texas, near Fort Bliss, and putting my address up for memberships and subscriptions, I was surprised and touched to receive a package from Stan that included a letter of support, a check, and a copy of his upcoming book, Stan Veit's History of the Personal Computer in pre-release form. I devoured his book and quickly read it twice. It became, and still is, my favorite. Sometime in 1997, I had returned to my hometown of Jacksonville, Florida, and Stan invited me down to Titusville, at the Space Coast, to give me some of his old computers and memorabilia. I ended up staying the night with Stan and Dee Dee, and found them both to be just such nice, down-to-earth people. I joined them for dinner, then breakfast, and some friendly discussion. Stan remained active in technology, writing occasional articles for ComputerShopper.com and in forums, plus starting his own computer history site and Web 2.0, the magazine. In 2006, I discovered podcasts, and there was even one about computer history, the Retrobits podcast by Earl Evans. Soon after, I also discovered the Macintosh Folklore Radio podcast. Derek Warren read chapters from the blog folklore.org, anecdotes about the development of Apple's original Macintosh computer and the people who created it. This gave me the idea to approach Stan and his publisher about doing the same thing with his computer history book. I felt that the book deserved far more exposure. I also still believe that the free audiobook podcast will actually help sell more copies of the printed book when the new edition is released. Stan graciously granted me permission, and I set about recording it. After completing the rather long first episode, which included the foreword, introduction, dedication, and Chapter 1, life got in the way. Recently, I uploaded Chapter 2 in July, and Chapter 3 is currently in the works. I'm dedicated to completing Stan's book, putting up a chapter at least every month now. Stan was a great man. There are many in computer history circles that recognize his contributions and accomplishments. Stan was the first member of my Historical Computer Society in 1993, and ironically, I am just now starting this group up again as a monthly club. Hopefully, the first step in finally creating a nonprofit, self-governing educational organization. I will dedicate it to him to help keep his memory alive. I'm expecting a package in the mail soon, and I can't wait. I decided to do a search on eBay for Computer Shopper, and I actually found some old copies for sale. I currently have 4 issues from 1987, but they are from before I personally started reading it. I did save about a half dozen of Stan's articles that I pulled out of my copies back in 1993, but now I have 6 new issues ranging from between the years 1991 and 1993. It will be very nostalgic and exciting to look through them. And that was the tribute I wrote back in 2010. It still brings back so many memories of reading Stan's Computer Shopper columns, exchanging those early emails on CompuServe, and making that unforgettable trip to Titusville to visit him and Dee Dee. Stan truly was the bedrock of so much of what we celebrate in this hobby today, which is exactly why Randy and I wanted to help bring his words to life. If you're new to the channel, or if this is your first time hearing about it, we're producing a complete, authorized audiobook series of Stan Veit's History of the Personal Computer right here on YouTube. We're deep into the chapters now, tracing the Wild West days of the early microcomputer revolution. If you haven't listened to the earlier chapters yet, be sure to check out the playlist on the channel. And if you have your own memories of Stan or the old Computer Shopper days, I'd love to hear them. Leave a comment below. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and we'll see you back here very soon. Thank you for listening.